If you're looking to set up a company in Dubai, one of the main questions in your mind might be, but what about banking? Is banking in Dubai safe for businesses? Which banks should I use to open a bank account for my business? And how can I open a bank account for my business in Dubai? Well, in this video, as someone who has been running a company in Dubai and banking in Dubai for both personally and for my company, I'm going to give a full guide on business banking in Dubai. How to open business bank accounts, how to make sure your company even qualifies, because by the way, there's a lot of mistakes you can make in the company setup process that might even mean you cannot even get one at all. So if you watch this video, you can make sure that you will actually get a bank account. And then we'll talk about which types of banks and which specific banks I use personally and which ones I actually recommend for you, as well as the entire process on how to open a bank account for your company step by step. Do note that this video is only about business banking. If you want a similar guide on personal banking in Dubai, I made a video like that already, so I'm not gonna repeat that here, and I will leave it down below in the description and also in a card at the very end of this video, so you can watch it right after this one. But before we get into the main questions of which banks to use, how to open an account, we need to talk about some very big mistakes that might mean you cannot get banking at all. And this might surprise many people. You might think like, well, if you have a company open in Dubai, surely you can get a bank account, because what's the point in having a company if I can't get banking for it? But it might surprise you to hear that there are actually cases where you might have a company set up in the UAE, but you cannot get banking. Like every single bank is just rejecting you. And this can happen because banks are, of course, private institutions. They are not obligated to take on your company. So there's certain types of companies that generally banks will not work with at all. And to figure out what these types are, as you might be aware, when you're opening up a company in Dubai, you can either choose a mainland company or you can choose a free zone company. And if you choose a free zone company, there are many different free zones where you can open this company. But it turns out that different free zones are not actually created equal. Why is that? Well, different free zones have different levels of compliance with the government. Like these free zones are their own entities, and some of them follow government regulations better than others. They vet the people they take on more strictly than others. And from a bank's perspective, if you know that there is a free zone that's a very bad reputation in terms of like they're not vetting their customers, they're letting whoever from companies, you as the bank might not want to open bank accounts for companies from those types of free zones. Why is that? Because you as the bank, if you happen to give a bank account to someone who is the wrong person, who is a criminal or something like that, you're going to end up in a lot of trouble with the government, which is why it is very important that when you form your company, you form it in a good, reputable free zone. And in most cases, this means that it's going to be more expensive than those cheap ones. The classic example is that you go to Dubai, you figure out, okay, I'm just going to use a service provider to open a company for me. And then you figure out, well, I don't really know the difference between all these free zones. I'm just going to go for the cheapest option. And this is exactly what most service providers out there will do. They will choose one of these cheaper free zones so that they can advertise a cheaper price to you, because of course they have to pass the free zone cost to you as the customer. And then you say, well, great, I can open a company for 3,000 dirhams instead of 20,000 dirhams with this other option. Why would I pay more when I can do the same thing for less? Well, this is exactly what is going to happen if you use one of these cheap providers. They're going to open your company in one of these terrible free zones, and then when you take that company and you go to banks, even some of the easier banks that we'll cover in this video, they will not open the account for you. So you want to be very careful to read the reviews of the service provider that you're going to use before you use them. Make sure that they use one of these good free zones and do not go for the cheapest service out there. I'm telling you from experience, we get so many emails with our agency, the people who I work with, from people who have been scammed by one of these people who open a company and then they come to us, hey, we can't open banking, what can we do? And then they have to dissolve that company and reopen another company, which obviously means you pay twice, and it's a whole mess. So just do it right the first time. If you want to use people who actually know what they're doing, who actually are going to make sure that you are put in the right free zone, we're going to make sure you get banking, and in fact even open the bank account for you directly, you can use my contacts and GenZone. You can get a free consultation in the link down below in the description, where you can speak to them for free, ask any questions you have, they can explain the entire process to you, and then you can move forward from there. And if you read their reviews, which I'm not expecting you to take my word for it, you can read their Google reviews, their Trustpilot reviews, you will see there is an absolute 100% record of us being able to set up this company successfully and also to get banking for all of our clients successfully. So obviously you don't have to use my partners, but whoever you use, just look at their reviews beforehand, make sure that you are getting your company set up properly in a proper free zone so so you don't have any banking issues. So that covers how to make sure you qualify. Now, how do you open a business bank account in the UAE and which bank should you use? So in general, we have two types of banks you can open with. You have digital banks, where there's pretty much one main option, and then you have traditional banks. So talking about digital banks. So mainly we're talking about a bank called WIO, specifically WIO Business, which is the main bank account that actually like 99% of people probably use, because as we will see, it is actually a better option in most cases than the traditional ones. Essentially, what WIO is that it is a digital only bank, meaning they don't have physical branches. And that might lead many people to ask, well, is it safe because it's a digital bank? But here we need to distinguish between two kinds of digital banks. You have EMIs and you have digital banks. A digital bank like WIO is still a real bank with a real banking license, everything like that. They just don't have physical branches. And most of the time, I mean, you don't need physical branches anyway. They're just a bank that decided that they're not going to open physical branches where you can walk in, like talk to someone and something like that. That is the only difference between WIO and all the other banks we'll cover in a moment. And then on the other side, we have something called EMI, which stands for Electronic Money Institution. For example, we have WISE. WISE is not a real bank. It's just like a software layer on top of banks where they hold their customer funds in real banks underneath. That is different. WIO is not like that. WIO is a real bank with a real banking license. They actually hold your money because they are a real bank, and also they are owned by the government. They are owned by Etisalat, First Abu Dhabi Bank, and First Abu Dhabi Bank, one of the biggest banks in the UAE. It is itself owned by the government, so it's practically a government-owned bank. So yes, WIO Bank is safe, but I made a full, more detailed analysis on whether UAE banks in general are safe, which I will leave down below in the description or also in a card at the end of this video. So what do you get with WIO? It's essentially a bank that you only interact with online. You get multi-currency accounts as well as a debit card. You can use Apple Pay. You can even connect it to Stripe directly if you need to accept payments. You can make invoices. You get a physical checkbook because again, this is a real bank. And also you can deposit cash just like with any other bank. So for 99% of cases, WIO gives you everything that you need, and it's also very easy to open the account. All you need to do is download their app. You need to give some information like your trade license, your Emirates ID, everything like that, and then in a couple of days your account should be open if there's no issues, and in most cases there's not going to be any issues. When you are opening the account, make sure you use the code C094. This is GenZone, my partner's affiliate code, because at GenZone we have direct contacts at very high level in WIO. So if you just use that code, that means that if there's any issue, we can help you directly, and we can also get the account opened much faster than the normal process. The only drawbacks with WIO is that for most businesses, it seems like you cannot get a credit card. Now they have a WIO credit card that you can get, but I've plenty of times, I've had an account, bunch of money coming in and out every single month, but they still don't seem to accept me for it. They don't really give you a reason for why they don't want to accept you. Now, maybe you will be able to get approved, but it seems like most people cannot actually get approved for this credit card. Also, there's little things like, for example, while you have a multi-currency account, the debit card is not actually multi-currency. It will always take the money from your AED balance, even if you're spending in US dollars and you have US dollars on your US dollar account in WIO, it will still spend from the dirhams, which is kind of annoying, and it's different to the WIO Personal where you can actually spend in multi-currency as well. But these are small things, and for 99.9% of cases, WIO will have everything that you need as a business for a business bank account, which is why to this day this is the only business bank account that I use, and they are not affiliated with this. Like, I'm not getting any kickback. I wish they had an affiliate scheme or something. Now then, we do have traditional bank. Obviously, you can technically open a corporate account with any of the major banks out there, like First Abu Dhabi Bank, Emirates NBD, Rock Bank, etc., etc. But in most cases, what this is going to require is a physical office address in the UAE. And if you run something like an online business like I do, you might not have this. Now, obviously, any business, you can just get an office address, or maybe you actually need an office, like you have employees, then obviously there's not going to be any problem. But if you don't want to have an office, pay rent for a real office, then most likely you're not going to be able to open a bank account with one of these traditional banks for your business. That is, obviously, personally, you'll be able to do it as long as you're a resident. And in fact, if you set up in Dubai directly with us, with GenZone, we will even open your personal and your business bank account for you directly. Like, you don't even have to speak to the banks. Like, we'll just open it for you in like 1 to 2 days. But for businesses, you're going to need an address for these traditional banks, with the one exception being Rock Bank if you use GenZone to set up in Dubai, because we have direct contacts also at Rock Bank, and only for our clients we're able to open an account at Rock Bank for your business even if you don't have this office address. So this is the one exception, but if you're doing this on your own and you don't have contacts, then you're just not going to be able to open one without the office address. However, again, for 99% of the cases, you don't need one of these accounts. The traditional banks are probably going to be worse in terms of user experience because WEO is newer. The technology, the phone app experience is going to be better. They understand online businesses better, and they're only really useful if you need things like business loans from this bank, you need letters of credit, or if you need like credit cards and you're not able to get the credit card from WEO, although even there I'm not really sure if they have many options. So I hope that gives you an idea on the different types of bank accounts, which ones you should use, how to open the accounts and everything like that. But the big question in many people's mind is still going to be, are Dubai banks actually safe? Because you heard, for example, that the UAE doesn't actually have a deposit insurance scheme like something like the UK or US do. Well, spoiler alert, the answer is yes, they are safe, but you don't have to take my word for it, because I actually went and analyzed. I looked at UAE banks and compared them objectively to Western banks, like banks in the US, banks in the UK. So if you're interested in the details on that, where I go very deep into analyzing are Dubai banks actually safe, you can watch this video right here. And if you're looking for a similar guide to this, but on personal banking in the UAE, you can watch this video right here, which is my full guide on personal banking as well as credit cards in Dubai. So watch one of these videos next, and I will see you in the next one.